Have you ever felt that quiet, gnawing frustration? The one that simmers beneath the surface when your personal space, your hard-won peace is slowly but surely chipped away? Perhaps it's a boundary crossed at work, a promise broken by someone you trusted, or simply the feeling of being unheard, unseen, in a world that often demands so much, yet offers so little respect in return. Life, for David Miles, had always been a masterclass in resilience. From the concrete jungle of his youth, where every step was a careful calculation to avoid unseen pitfalls, to the polished boardrooms, where he often found himself the lone black face, pushing tirelessly to carve out his rightful space, David had built his life on the bedrock of quiet determination. He very often said he'd spent years carrying the weight of expectation, not just from his family, but from a world that often demanded more while offering less. His recent divorce, though amicable, had been another quiet tremor, reminding him that even the most carefully constructed lives could shift beneath your feet. For too long, peace had been a fleeting whisper, a distant promise, always just out of reach. Then he found Harmony Hills, not just a suburb, but a name that resonated with every weary bone in his body. The real estate agent had painted a picture of idyllic tranquility, manicured lawns, friendly faces, and a sense of belonging. But for David, it was the house itself, a sprawling single-story haven that truly sang to his soul. And at its heart, glistening under the golden afternoon sun, lay the sparkling, azure expanse of a swimming pool. This wasn't just a luxury. It was a profound symbol, a symbol of every late night he'd spent hunched over blueprints, every microaggression he'd swallowed with a forced smile, every sacrifice he'd made to climb mountains no one else even saw. This pool, this home, was his hard-earned reward, his personal oasis, a sanctuary where he could finally shed the armor he'd worn for decades. Here, he imagined, he could simply be. Those first few weeks in Harmony Hills were a revelation. Each morning he'd rise early, the only sound the gentle rustle of leaves, and step into the cool, embracing waters of his pool. The world's demands seemed to dissolve with each stroke. He'd float on his back, gazing at the limitless blue sky, feeling a profound sense of calm he hadn't known was possible. This was freedom, he realized, a tangible freedom from the constant vigilance, the subtle judgments, the incessant noise that had defined his life. He envisioned quiet evenings, the gentle lapping of water, the soft glow of moonlight, just him and his thoughts. This wasn't just a house. It was a promise of unadulterated peace, a space where he controlled the narrative, where every boundary was his to draw. He'd almost missed it, that fleeting, almost imperceptible glimpse, a curious, lingering stare from the house next door as he unpacked, a slight tremor of unease, quickly dismissed. Just new neighbor curiosity, he'd told himself, brushing it off as he plunged back into the comforting depths of his dream. After all, what could possibly shatter such perfect harmony? Little did he know, that dream was about to face its harshest test, a test that would force David to either fight for his peace or lose it forever. The honeymoon phase in Harmony Hills, alas, was brutally short-lived. It started subtly, almost innocuously, like a pebble dropped into still water, a rogue baseball landing perfectly by the pool's edge. Then a few days later, a child's bright yellow floaty bobbing cheerfully on the surface, definitely not David's. David, ever the pragmatist, chalked it up to innocent mistakes. He'd retrieve the ball, leave the floaty neatly by the fence. He believed in giving people the benefit of the doubt, a philosophy honed by years of navigating complex situations. But then came the first real intrusion. One sweltering afternoon, David returned home to the splash of laughter echoing from his backyard. His heart sank. There, in his pristine sanctuary, were two teenagers and a younger child, cannonballing into his pool, shrieking with delight. They were the Miller kids from next door. The boisterous family with the overly friendly father Thomas Miller. When David, summoning every ounce of his ingrained politeness, stepped out and gently requested they leave, the oldest boy, barely glancing up, just grumbled, "Oh, sorry, Mr. Miles. Dad said it was fine for a quick dip." A quick dip? Without even asking? David, accustomed to directness and respect in his professional life, found this casual disregard for boundaries jarring. He simply stated, "This is private property. Please, use your own pool." The kids reluctantly climbed out, dripping water and leaving a faint trail of muddy footprints. That was the first crack, and it widened with alarming speed. Quick dips became daily occurrences. Weekends meant Thomas Miller himself, a barrel-chested man with a booming laugh and an unsettlingly casual demeanor, would stride onto David's property. "Morning, David. Hope you don't mind. Just letting the kids cool off," he'd bellow, as if this were a public park. David's polite remonstrations were met with a shrug, a dismissive wave, or a hollow, "No problem, won't happen again," that invariably did. It was a subtle, insidious erosion of his peace. 1,000 tiny cuts to the sanctuary he'd worked so hard to build. The pool, once a symbol of serene escape, now felt like a constant battleground, a source of gnawing anxiety. This wasn't just about a pool, it was about the sanctity of his space, his peace, his boundaries. And for David, a black man in a predominantly white neighborhood, the stakes felt higher. He couldn't just lose his temper or escalate aggressively. He knew the narrative that could easily be spun, the labels that could be attached, the angry black man, the difficult neighbor. He was hyper-aware of the microaggressions he'd faced his whole life, the constant need to prove his worth. His composure. He didn't want to be that guy. He had to be strategic, measured. Every ignored request, every casual trespass weighed on him. He saw the other neighbors, too. Some averted their eyes when the Miller kids were splashing. Some offered fleeting, sympathetic glances. But no one, not a single soul, stepped forward to intervene. He was alone in this, a silent burden he carried, the weight of ignored boundaries pressing down on the very peace he'd finally found. His dream, his sanctuary, was slowly but surely being stolen, drop by agonizing drop. And for David, a man who had fought for every inch of ground in his life, this quiet invasion was becoming unbearable. The polite requests, the subtle hints, the silent suffering. David had tried it all. He'd lived his life by the rules, expecting others to do the same. But the Millers? They operated on a different playbook, one written entirely for their convenience. The constant invasions weren't just an annoyance. They were a deliberate, ongoing assault on his peace, a mocking echo of all the times he'd been forced to grin and bear it. Each trespass was a fresh wound, reminding him of every boundary he'd had to fight for, every space he'd had to defend, from childhood onwards. The breaking point arrived on a scorching Saturday afternoon. David had a crucial client call, demanding his full concentration, but from next door, the cacophony was unbearable. Not just the usual shouts and splashes, but amplified music, rowdy laughter, and the unmistakable sound of a full-blown party. He peered over the fence, and his blood ran cold. Not only were the Miller kids and Thomas in his pool, but a dozen of their friends and family, too. They were playing raucous games, splashing water onto his meticulously maintained patio, even leaving empty soda cans by the edge. This wasn't a quick dip. It was an open defiance, a blatant colonization of his sanctuary. He tried to call Thomas, but the calls went straight to voicemail. His polite patience, carefully constructed over a lifetime of dealing with disrespect, snapped. This wasn't just about property anymore. It was about principle. It was about his dignity. In that moment, a quiet rage, cold and clear, settled over David. He wouldn't yell. He wouldn't beg. He wouldn't even argue. He would fight back, not with the futile weapons of politeness, but with the sharp precision of his own intellect. As a civil engineer, David was a master of systems, of problem-solving, of finding the most efficient solution to any challenge. He started with documentation, a meticulous log of every single intrusion, complete with dates, times, and detailed descriptions. This wasn't just for a potential lawsuit, it was for him, a testament to their audacity, a chronicle of his stolen peace. And then, a stroke of inspiration, born from a casual conversation with a pool technician months ago, a memory surfaced. A niche maintenance technique. Hyperchlorination. He spent the next few hours meticulously researching. Hyperchlorination, he learned, was a powerful, harmless process used to shock a pool, killing algae and bacteria. It temporarily turned the water cloudy, unappealing, and utterly unusable for several days. But David wasn't just going for cloudy. He found a non-toxic foaming agent, often used for pool cover cleaning, that would amplify the visual effect. This wasn't about revenge, it was about reclamation. It was about sending a clear, undeniable message, a message written not in words, but in water itself. He gathered his supplies, the heavy buckets of chlorine, the unassuming bottle of foaming agent. A strange calm settled over him, the calm of a man who finally had a plan, a tangible way to take back what was his. The next day, the Millers' backyard was alive with even more festivity. A big barbecue, laughter, music, and then the ultimate affront. Thomas Miller, leading a fresh group of guests, triumphantly pointing to David's sparkling pool, gesturing for them to jump in. "Kids, folks, over here! The water's fine!" he bellowed. This was it. David took a deep breath, his hand steady. He waited for the opportune moment, when the most people were in the pool, enjoying their unauthorized dip. Then, with deliberate, calculated movements, he began. He carefully poured the specialized concoction into his pool. The crystal-clear water began to churn almost immediately. A milky cloud spread rapidly, followed by an explosion of innocuous bright green foam that rose like an alien presence, transforming the inviting blue into a sickening, churning swamp. The air filled with a faint, unusual scent. The shrieks from the pool turned from joy to horror. "What is that? It's bubbling! Oh my God, it's turning green!" Panic erupted. The Millers' guests scrambled out, slipping on the foamy patio, eyes wide with disgust and confusion. Thomas Miller's face, initially flushed with a party host glow, turned a sickly shade of white. The festive music seemed to die in the sudden, eerie silence, replaced only by the gurgling of the now unusable pool and the bewildered murmurs of his guests. David watched from his window, a single, unreadable expression on his face. He hadn't said a word. He hadn't raised his voice. He had simply taken back his peace. But he knew this was only the beginning of the storm. The immediate aftermath was a stunned silence, broken only by the dripping of bewildered guests fleeing David's now ghastly green foaming pool. Then came the storm. Thomas Miller, his face a contorted mask of fury and humiliation, stormed towards David's fence. "What the hell was that, Miles?" he roared, his voice echoing through the suddenly quiet cul-de-sac. "Are you out of your mind? You ruined our party! You could have hurt someone!" His guests, now huddled awkwardly in his backyard, muttered amongst themselves, casting uneasy glances between the two men. David, however, remained utterly calm. He walked to the fence, his posture radiating a quiet power. "Mr. Miller," he began, his voice steady, devoid of anger, but rich with unwavering resolve. "This is my property, my pool. For weeks I've asked, politely, repeatedly, for you and your family to respect my boundaries. I've shown you courtesy you haven't extended to me. I've documented every single intrusion, dates, times, even video evidence." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. You chose to ignore every warning. You chose to trespass, to disrespect my home, my peace. My pool is simply reflecting the reality of your actions." Thomas, sputtering, tried to interrupt, but David held his gaze. "This is not about a party, Mr. Miller. This is about respect, something it seems you've forgotten to teach your children, and perhaps yourself." The confrontation wasn't just physical. It was a battle of wills, and David, armed with truth and quiet dignity, was winning. Just as Thomas's anger began to morph into something resembling stunned silence, another figure approached the fence. Melissa Miller, Thomas's wife. Her usual bright demeanor was replaced by a strained politeness. "David," she began, her voice softer than her husband's, I want to apologize. Thomas can be a bit much sometimes." David simply nodded, waiting. Melissa sighed, a heavy, weary sound. "He truly doesn't mean any harm. He doesn't understand boundaries. He always thinks everyone is as open as he is. He's always been like this, since we were kids. He sees something good, and he just assumes it's for everyone." And here was the twist, the unexpected crack in the facade that David hadn't anticipated. "It's not just your pool, David," Melissa continued, her voice barely a whisper, her eyes avoiding Thomas's now downcast gaze. "He's done this with other neighbors, in other ways. He means well, but he steamrolls. We've had issues before with, well, other things. It's a deep-seated habit. I've tried to talk to him, but he doesn't listen until there are consequences." It was a confession, a glimpse into the complicated inner workings of the Miller household. A silent acknowledgement that Thomas's entitlement wasn't just aimed at David, but a fundamental flaw in his character, straining even his own family. David saw not just an apology, but a plea for understanding, a weary acceptance of a pattern of behavior that was clearly exhausting for Melissa as well. The direct confrontation, coupled with Melissa's quiet revelations, seemed to chip away at Thomas's bluster. Later that evening, a knock came at David's door. It was Thomas, alone. His booming voice was gone, replaced by a quiet, almost shaky tone. "David," he said, looking at his feet, then finally meeting David's gaze. I was out of line, completely. Melissa, she made me see it. This whole thing, it's not right. Your home is your home. Your pool is your pool. I had no right. I truly apologize for everything." It wasn't the defiant Thomas from earlier. This was a man humbled, perhaps for the first time, by the stark reality of his actions and their very public consequences. David simply nodded, allowing the apology to hang in the air, a silent acknowledgement of the battle won, but also the fragile peace that now needed to be rebuilt. The storm had broken, but the landscape of Harmony Hills had irrevocably changed. The public apology from Thomas, however grudgingly given, felt like a small victory. But David wasn't just interested in winning battles. He was interested in reclaiming his peace, fully and truly. He knew that true harmony in Harmony Hills wouldn't come from a quiet truce born of fear, but from a genuine understanding, a rebuilding of trust on new, firm foundations. He had shown them his boundaries. Now he needed to show them his desire for true community on his terms. So David did something few would expect from a man who had just deployed a biochemical deterrent against his neighbors. He decided to host a neighborhood cookout. The invitations were simple, elegant, and extended to everyone on the block, including the Millers. It wasn't about gloating. It was about recalibrating the social dynamics, about demonstrating that respect and connection could coexist. He knew some might come out of curiosity, others out of obligation, but David was banking on the fundamental human desire for connection once the air was clear. The day of the cookout arrived, bright and warm. The initial atmosphere was, predictably, a little stiff. Neighbors chatted nervously, glancing at David, then at the still recovering Miller family, who arrived with a surprisingly large fruit salad. The topic of the pool was the elephant in the room. A silent tension. But David, no longer the guarded newcomer, moved through the crowd with a quiet confidence. He spoke not of the past conflict, but of the beauty of Harmony Hills, the shared joy of quiet evenings, the simple pleasure of living in a place with good people. Slowly, carefully, the ice began to melt. Conversations flowed about gardening tips, local school events, and the best places to grab coffee. The Millers, particularly Melissa, seemed genuinely relieved. Melissa found David by the grill. "Thank you, David," she whispered, a genuine sincerity in her eyes. "For this. For everything. It's hard to change old habits." David simply nodded, a silent understanding passing between them. Then, in a moment that surprised David, Thomas himself approached. He wasn't the boisterous man of before. He simply handed David a six-pack of his favorite craft beer. "Peace offering, Miles," he said, a genuine, if still slightly awkward, smile on his face. "And I get it now. Really, your space, your rules. We'll be better neighbors." It wasn't just an apology, it was an acknowledgement of boundaries, a true turning point. Other neighbors, emboldened by the shifting dynamic, approached David too. Mrs. Henderson, a sweet elderly woman from across the street, quietly confessed, "I always felt bad, David. They tried to use my garden tools too, but I just didn't know what to do." A young couple from down the street nodded in agreement. "You really showed us all what standing up for yourself looks like," the husband admitted. David realized something profound. His battle hadn't just been for himself. It had, inadvertently, set a new standard for the entire community. He wasn't just reclaiming his peace, he was helping to redefine what harmony truly meant in Harmony Hills. A harmony built on mutual respect, not just passive politeness. The pool, once a stolen pleasure, now held a deeper meaning for David. It was no longer just a beautiful amenity. It was a gleaming testament to his unwavering resolve, a physical manifestation of the boundaries he had fiercely defended. He swam now, not with a knot of anxiety in his stomach, but with a profound sense of ownership and peace. The water still sparkled, but it reflected a different kind of light, the light of personal triumph. This wasn't merely about a pool, though. It was about something far more significant. David realized that his fight with the Millers had been a microcosm of his entire life. From childhood, he'd been taught to be resilient, to work hard, to rise above. But he'd also learned, sometimes painfully, to internalize disrespect, to silently endure slights, to avoid conflict, especially when navigating spaces where he felt he already stood out. He had always been the one to adapt, to bend, to find common ground. This time, however, the line had been drawn, and he had not only held it, but he had also reclaimed it. He had learned that true strength wasn't just about enduring. It was about defining and defending your sacred spaces, both physical and emotional. His journey in Harmony Hills had forced him to confront his own hesitations, his own ingrained fears of being perceived negatively. The weight of being a black man in a predominantly white neighborhood, the constant awareness of how his actions might be misinterpreted, had often stifled his voice. But this conflict, paradoxically, had liberated him. He had acted with integrity, intelligence, and unwavering principle, and in doing so he had earned respect, not just from his neighbors, but from himself. He was no longer just a successful engineer. He was a man who stood firm for what was right, regardless of the discomfort. As David often found himself, on quiet evenings sitting by his sparkling pool, he would reflect. The battles of the past were truly behind him. The anxieties that had once clouded his sanctuary had evaporated. The future stretched out before him, as calm and inviting as the waters of his pool, precisely because he had learned the invaluable lesson of defining his own terms. His home was truly his home, a sanctuary built not just with bricks and mortar, but with courage and conviction. And in Harmony Hills, a neighborhood that had tested his spirit, he had found something even more precious than peace. He had found belonging, earned through respect. So, what's your Harmony Hills? What boundaries are you allowing to be blurred? What peace is slowly slipping away? This isn't just David's story. It's a testament to the power within each of us to define our space, to demand respect, and to reclaim the tranquility we deserve. Your peace is worth fighting for. Your boundaries are sacred. Don't let anyone steal your joy or your space. Stand firm and you will find your own Harmony Hills, that place, physical or emotional, where you truly feel at home. The pool, now sparkling clear again, remained exclusively David's. But the fence, once a symbol of division, now felt like a friendly boundary. The gate, while still firmly locked for unauthorized use, no longer felt like a barrier between warring factions. It was simply a gate, a demarcation of private space that was now understood and respected. David found himself enjoying spontaneous conversations with Thomas over the fence, exchanging good-natured banter about lawn care. The silence wasn't stolen anymore. It was chosen, cherished, and shared in respectful doses. For the first time, David didn't just live in Harmony Hills. He felt truly part of it, connected to a community that had, through conflict and resolution, learned to respect the unseen lines that define us all. For too long, many of us have carried the burden of unspoken grievances, the quiet frustrations of ignored lines. Perhaps you've felt pressure to say yes when you meant no, or tolerated disrespect to avoid conflict. David's story is a powerful reminder that standing firm, defining your terms, and even, at times, taking unexpected action isn't selfish. It's an act of radical self-respect. It's how you ensure that your peace, your joy, your very sense of self remains truly your own. So as you go about your day, driving, working, or simply unwinding, ask yourself, where are my boundaries? Am I truly guarding my peace? Remember David Miles in his pool. Remember that sometimes the most profound victories are won not with loud shouts, but with quiet conviction and the courage to make a statement no one can ignore. Your life is your property. Your peace is your greatest treasure. Go out there and reclaim it. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories of resilience, unexpected triumphs, and life-changing lessons. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear this powerful message. We believe in your strength, and we're here to share stories that inspire it. Until next time, guard your peace fiercely and live authentically.